Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is my first attempt at Zoom Town Hall. What I really want to do is talk about, how things are going right now for you with all the different programs that are out there. I want to get some feedback as how we move forward in dealing with the COVID crisis, the impact it's having on our economy, as well as our communities. The news from Manitoba, of course, is Premier Pallister has started moving forward with the opening of the economy starting Monday. That will start be able to do some more recreational activities. Parks will be open. People can start golfing again, and that will see more people at the cottages in around Lake Winnipeg, Lake Manitoba, and up and down the Winnipeg River. We'll also expect to see some of the other classified services, such as therapeutic requirements that we have: massage therapy, acupuncture, getting our haircut. I already got mine booked for Wednesday. These are all things that we need to see start opening up, but we need to at the same time make sure that we're trying to manage the crisis. Last stats I had for Manitoba is that we have right around 50 active cases of COVID. There's still the chances of transmission of the disease, so we have to still be diligent in practicing social distancing as well as frequent hand washing. And I think as some of these businesses open up, there'll be requirements for masks. So with that, what we'll do is I'll go through the questions that were submitted, and then we'll open up the floor for discussion. And so the first question we received was from Gwen Harp from the Gimli Glider Museum. And Gwen, if you want to go first and just talk about the question that you have. So you will be unmuted. You find her, I'll unmute. Oh, I don't have the power to unmute. So Megan, okay, now I can hear you, Gwen. Okay, go ahead.
Well, no, we just find that a lot of the plans that are offered right now kind of don't fit us because we're totally volunteer and we have a very small space. But as far as funding, we rely on the tourist industry. So my question was, I only see two plans that we might fit into, and I'm assuming that the Manitoba provincial plan would be the best fit for us. I don't know, because the other one relies on the landlord.
Yeah, so the federal one is definitely directed towards the landlord to give that relief. The subsidy goes to them, not to the renter. So as a tenant, if you're trying to put more money into your coffers to pay back the landlord, then the provincial program, the Manitoba Gap Protection Program, would be the route to go, is my understanding. You may want to talk to Derek Johnson, your MLA, just to get a little more detail on that. But I think that would probably be the best way. I also believe that museums and libraries are going to be part of this first phase, if I'm not mistaken, in opening up starting next week. Just that you won't have the volumes there to sustain it. That's the only question. And social distancing has to be maintained the whole time.
Yeah, and I think personally, I think we're too small of a floor space,
right,
to
maintain social distance. Yeah.
So that being said, I also don't believe that the MGPP portal has been put up to apply for the financing yet. I don't know if you know any different.
That I don't know. I think that I haven't checked that. What we'll do, Gwen, is we'll get back to you, or I'll reach out to Derek and make sure that we get that information to you as to portals as well as the gap protection program. How's that?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so next question came from Susan Braunholmer at Central and Lake Chamber of Commerce. Susan, can you just relay what you were saying?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you.
Okay. Actually, my question was pretty much the same as your first question. I want to know what our businesses could do that don't fall into the federal government as far as their rent,
Right.
because it goes more for the landlord. So thank you. You've answered my question with the first question you had.
Okay, good. Anything else up there, Susan, that I should be
In
aware of
Arborg,
how things are going in Arborg? Yeah.
they're not going too bad. It's just I need to get some of these businesses into this GAP program or something, I think, and inform them of it because they don't know about it. I've talked to a few of them and they're paying the rent, and the landlord doesn't have a mortgage on the building. So they're still paying rent. They've got to come up with some way that they can hopefully get some assistance. I'm
All right.
assuming maybe through the GAP then.
Yeah, I think then the provincial GAP program would be the right way to go.
Okay. Outside of that, I mean, it's the social distancing after these openings are going to be a little different and something to get used to, I think, in the months to come. So, but we're doing not too bad out here.
Good. Glad to hear it. Okay, so we'll continue on. John Mackay from Community Paramedic Services. John, how are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. How are you folks?
Good. Can hear you fine. So
Good.
you had a question as well.
Well, I had a couple of questions. Yeah, the
Okay.
first one is that, first of all, I took advantage of the personal benefit because there had been a downturn with my new business, which we started last year. So I qualified for the new benefit, but then it turns out I'm in the medical transportation industry, and business, you know, it's kind of on and off and it's in spurts right now. And I was concerned if I continue to do some business, what the ramifications are versus the $2,000 benefit that was sent to me by the federal government. So I talked to my accountant, and they said you're allowed to make $1,000 aside from that benefit. And I'm assuming that's during that 4-week period for the benefit.
Yes.
Now, if I've had a couple of inquiries from hospitals and that for transporting people, and we're doing it much more efficiently than a lot of the government services that are provided cost effectively. And my concern is if I make more than $1,000 during these 4 weeks, do I have to repay it dollar for dollar? What is the ramification? I haven't been back to the accountant. I'm a little lazy. I thought I'd talk to you.
So as long as you've met the payroll qualifications under the business accounts, as well as you could apply for the, I believe the $40,000 loan that you could get through the CEBA account. So you have that option available to you as well. But it is taking on more debt. So I always caution people, especially you're in this precarious economic situation that we're in, that more debt does have to get paid back at some point in time. The first 10,000 is forgivable. As to the benefit itself, let me just check my papers here. Just see, that's the loan.
Right. We're kind of talking about
the $1,000 a month CERB payment that you're receiving, right? For
right.
a dividend holder, and then what happens if your revenues go up above
of $1,000?
Yeah, the $1,000 of whether or not that gets clawed back.
I mean, I'm quite happy to
keep
I've
it.
already received it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm quite happy to repay it dollar for dollar as long as I'm not getting penalties because of it. And it's amazing talking to your neighbor Al Ajamodier on Manitoba Avenue and there in Salford. I've heard that some people, they're receiving this benefit and they're content to not even try to keep conducting business. We're getting used to being on social assistance. So it's a horrible thing. I want to keep doing business, right? But if
we need you guys all keep staying in business too.
Yeah,
and you know,
yeah, absolutely.
This is not sustainable what we're doing right now.
No, it's not. And I mean, even in the best scenario, I would maintain it's not sustainable. But we don't have a bottomless pit in healthcare, although I think healthcare seems to be the tail wagging the dog these days provincially. So, but anyway, that's another story. I'm just concerned that my efforts to keep doing business and helping, do what I'm doing, I not be penalized for it. I'm willing to pay back the $2,000 for a dollar should I make that much.
Right.
But I want to make sure there's no penalty,
Okay, I'll promise you this, John, that as soon as we get off the phone here, we will look at exactly what you are talking about from the standpoint of
Did you find the page, James?
I'm looking. You got it there, Megan, handy?
Yeah, so you should not be penalized, assuming that at the time that you signed on to CERB, you were under that $1,000 threshold.
Oh, yeah.
They just ask that as soon as you exceed the $1,000 threshold that you do log on and declare such. And then for the following 4-week period, if you're still under that $1,000 threshold, you can absolutely apply again.
I see. Okay. So
Thanks, Megan.
that's really helpful, Megan. Thank you. But you've kind of already touched on my second question, if I may, James.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So we started our business back in June of last year when I retired, and thanks to COVID, for the first couple of weeks of April, I really thought I was retired. But we've saved the provincial government here probably $200,000 that they don't even know about. When I've approached the Deputy Minister of Health provincially with my plan, they loved it. They wanted me to work on it. I approached Shared Health, and Shared Health got back to me with harassment that, oh, you can't do this, you can't. It's just bureaucracy, right? So while the government thought it was great, we have the same old bureaucrats in offices that are really opposed to to private enterprise trying to do things more efficiently. So the last 6 months of last year, we did 60 calls for service. This year I've done 70 already despite COVID. And that amounts to, if you look at provincial budgets and healthcare budgets, of saving the government $200,000, just me. And if I had more vehicles, more people working, the numbers are in the millions. And I've given them reports, I've shown them how I can save that. That being the case, since business is picking up, I'm wondering, I think by the numbers, I still qualify to go. Do I go to the bank for this $40,000 loan?
Yep.
And so I go to the bank, and then if I pay the loan back before 2022, then 10,000 is forgivable. Is that how it works?
That is exactly it.
Okay.
So banks and credit unions both are administrating that loan.
Credit unions too. That's a good bit of information. Thank you.
We had to fight for that. They weren't part of it at the beginning. They stuck with chartered banks, but as the opposition, we said you got to have credit unions, especially for rural areas. We have more credit unions than we have banks as financial institutions.
Yeah, I see no reason to put healthcare on hold in other avenues. I'm taking people for cancer treatments and that. These things, they're essential for people, right? But they don't require an emergency vehicle. So I'm looking at, despite what's going on, trying to use what resources there are available, and thanks to this loan from the federal government, to put another truck on the road and help out all the more. Full speed ahead.
Good.
Thanks,
John. Yeah, appreciate that. So next question is to Sheila Lamb from Scrap Chicks. Sheila, we'll just get you unmuted. You're live.
Hi, James. Thanks for taking my question. I was wanting to, my big thing was I was all gung-ho to look at the $40,000 loan for small businesses, and then was told some information about the T-Ford payroll, and that's where I'm a little frustrated and need some clarification if there's some help that way. I have a scrapbooking, paper crafting business that I started a couple years ago, and mostly it was online and mobile, and we were popping up like at events and things like that. Last year, the business evolved where we actually took on a brick and mortar location in Oakbank here, and so last May we took on the lease and we began the renovations, and in July we finally opened to the public. So the problem is, though, I'm a sole proprietor, and this whole T4 business is what's tripping me up, in the sense that, I had a couple retiree friends, and I have a daughter that graduated in June that kind of wages weren't substantial in the sense that
keep going. You cut out there for a little bit, but go ahead. Yep.
Okay, so the whole idea is now here we are, we roll around to 2020. We were forced to close our doors. We're trying everything we can to keep things going. But that $40,000 loan is exactly what a business like me needs with, a new brick and mortar. We were forced to close before we even reached our first anniversary of going brick and mortar. And, but being a sole proprietor, I don't T4 my income. I take all the profit into income and report it on my income tax. But if the whole T4 part of it, is that going to trip me up from being able to apply?
Yeah, right now it is. The government's been very, very stringent on this, that it has to be 20,000 on T4 payroll. That is, again, not what we like to see for those that are sole proprietors, those that are, although you can, as John just mentioned, you can get the $1,000 a month help as a sole proprietor. But if
Well,
you're
actually,
paying,
yeah, actually, I'm continuing to work full time at my regular job.
okay.
So I have a full-time job. I have not applied for CERB. I don't qualify. I don't need it. And that's fine. I'm grateful for that. But in order to keep my business afloat and you know, and moving forward, to put someone in the store to be able to work it and pay them on a regular payroll and get a payroll account, I've just been sort of paying, you know, a little bit here and there, you know, just a few dollars, because it hasn't been substantial wages, and I haven't been in a position to have a full-time person work for me, because I go into the store after work. I work in the store. I work in the store weekends, and I'm covering all that I can on my own. But how is it fair when income is income? If I'm taking all of the revenues into income and paying tax on that income, it's my pay. So just because I'm a sole proprietor and don't T4 myself, that makes no sense for that being a stipulation.
So so we continue to make the argument that small business owners that pay themselves through dividends should
Right.
be eligible for the program, and that they need to have access to that financing. You know, it comes back to what Trudeau said in the 2011 election, is that he considered that all small, or 2015 election, that he considered all small businesses tax cheats. And so he actually believes that. And if you look at all the changes that they've made in small business, or they attempted to make in small business taxations and rules around, which they did do on passive income, on your savings that you have for reinvesting in your business, or savings that you have for your retirement as a business owner, or for expansion. Those things are all not getting taxed closer to 75% if you have over $50,000 in your passive income. So it's great. You're okay if you're a publicly traded corporation. You're great. You're going to be covered as a sole proprietor, because we forced them to make some changes. But for those small businesses that are private corporations that have dividend payouts to their owners, they're right now not in allowed to participate. And so we've been making the argument. We did it again in question period. What we have is virtual question period, or a downsized question period, on Wednesday as well as on Tuesday. Pierre Polyev and James Cumming, my colleagues, have been leading the charge on this. Is that those small business holders that have that are set up as private corporations and pay themselves in dividends need to be taken care of just the same as everyone else. You know, it includes not only our Main Street shops up and down our streets and our communities. It also includes a lot of our doctors, our veterinarians, our chiropractors, our dentists. They operate under the same pretense, and they've been shut down, a lot of them as well. They have employees that they need to keep. So if they got employees, they're fine. But if they're operating just under their own shingle, then they have the same problems as you've encountered, and that's also true for accountants and consultants. So,
if we aren't the definition of a small business, then what are we? We're like I'm I could have just a regular job and not be trying to build something for myself, but I invested all this money. I'm trying to keep myself, build this little business, make in gross sales, do $100,000 a year. I'm and I'm paying tax on earnings. Like, I have to take that into income. I don't understand why I would have to be incorporated in order to T4 myself. That just takes it to a whole new level. That's a whole new level of business. That's not the small business owner.
Yeah, and that will give you just more red tape and more bureaucracy and more headache, and all you want to do is run your business.
Yeah, I don't have money to incorporate. It is not feasible nor beneficial for me to incorporate. I'm a one-man show with a few ladies willing to help me out here and there. I'm hoping to get to the point of having a full-time employee and pay wages and so on and so forth, but I just can't believe that I can't qualify to get a loan that I have to pay back under the government program because I don't T4 myself. That just seems really ridiculous. Earnings are earnings. If it's on my T1, why does it not qualify just because it's not on a T4?
Okay, yeah, no, and I'm with you, and so we'll continue to fight to make sure that these changes are made going forward. We just hope that Trudeau and Marno are listening.
And any other programs that would be available to me? I've asked my landlord to look into the rental part
Yeah,
of it.
definitely the rental relief is one. You can also apply towards the provincial GAP program as well. So you can look at both those.
That's the $6,000 program that you're talking about, the GAP?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think that's what it is. Yep.
Okay.
Megan?
Sheila, I'm just gonna
Yeah.
hop in here real quick. Lana at Community Futures for West Interlake just said
Lana's on the
in the chat here that they do have another GAP program coming through Community Futures, specifically for businesses that don't qualify for that $40,000. It hasn't, like, all the details are not out yet, but we'll be keeping our eyes on that, and I'll be sure to send you a note once we have more details.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Really
and
forgotten about.
Thanks.
And thank you, Lana, for that. I've been arguing that we should be making most of these programs available through our community futures as a good way of actually being able to help our rural communities. They are often the front lines and have access to the expertise in working with small businesses. So, Lana, thank you for that
Thank you.
information. Thanks, Sheila. Now, just so you know, if anyone wants to ask a question, we do have a number here that were, of course, submitted in advance that we're going to go through first. But as time permits, at the end, we'll take those. When you go to your where is it on here? On participants, I believe you can raise your hand.
It should be at the bottom of your screen. James, you probably don't see it because you're listed as a co-host, so you don't have to raise your hand. But for the rest of you, it should be at the bottom of your screen. There should be a raise hand button.
Yeah, so use the raise hand button. If you see it there, Jenny's shaking her head, so she mustn't see it. No, usually I know it's also at the bottom of the participants. If you click on participants at the bottom, it also often has it too. But since Megan and I are hosts, we don't see it. But if you raise your hands, Megan will see it for sure. I'll probably see it as well. Okay, so moving on, because the one thing we do need is we had a question submitted from Centered Care Inc. and we don't have a name to go with it. So who is that? Is that Marley? Okay, if you can unmute Marley.
Yeah.
McMillan. Here, we're just going to unmute you. There, you're on now, Marley.
Are you able to hear me, James?
We hear you.
How are you?
Very good. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. So we just have a couple questions. Do you want me to go through them one by one, James?
Sure, certainly.
Okay, so the first one that we're experiencing, we're a private home care company based out of St. Andrews. And a huge issue and difficulty we've had is the lack of PPE and how we are able to get our hands on PPE, considering there's such a shortage already in the public system. Considering the fact that we're private, it's been very difficult for us to get our hands on this stuff. And the store that we do generally go with is Stevens Medical Store based out of Winnipeg. And there are extreme wait times for everything from gloves to masks, you name it. And it's because obviously there's already a shortage public. So we're just not sure what route we could take to be able to get our hands on some of these items, basically to allow our employees to be safe working with our clients and therefore the clients stay safe.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head which companies you could go to outside of the ones that you usually do. I know that we have been using the Defense Production Act federally to allow more of our companies to transition over to making PPE. So there is a ramp up. We have seen a lot of mismanagement on our PPE stocks. There is, of course, a large volume that was thrown away that was in storage in Saskatchewan that they destroyed back in November. We also know that there was probably a couple of million masks and other material that were accessed in December and January for China and sent to China. And then, of course, the stuff that we've been receiving to China coming back, there was a number of flaws with it that had to be destroyed. We had, I believe it was close to 750,000 masks that were burnt because they were not safe.
Oh, okay.
So, and that was supplied by mainland China. So I think that the solution to all this is that we need to get more of our companies accessing local. We need to make sure that that is ramping up. The federal government has been riding herd on that file, and I think that we'll start seeing those numbers increase, including from what we had from 3M out of Minnesota. So we need to get more of those supplies available as well. But if you know, I don't know if you've talked to Al Najmodi, your MLA, but talk to Al and just see if he has any connections of any local companies that are making PPE. I suspect your biggest need would be the face masks.
Right now, at this point, yes.
Are you needing the N95 respirators or just normal surgical type masks?
Just surgical masks right now. But I mean, there's always a possibility for a situation where we might need one of the N95 masks.
Okay. So, you know, reach out to Al and, you know, even reach out to the provincial minister for seniors and active living, Cameron Friesen.
Okay.
Talk to Cam and or his office, and Megan will send you the contact information, as well as if we can access online any companies that are providing sales that you might be able to use to order some of your PPE.
Okay. And then the second question that we had was just with the self-family managed care program, there is extreme wait times when it comes to processing the documents. And obviously right now with everything that's going on in care homes, people are encouraging their loved ones to stay home as long as they can. And I'm just curious if there is anything being done to speed up the process on that front.
So say that again.
So with the self-family managed care program, in order for the documents to be processed, you're looking at right now anywhere from a month and a half, 2 months wait before they are actually able to get that funding from the government. And the self-family managed care is basically a government subsidy that whatever you would use publicly, you can take that and you can use it with a private agency, and then you're only responsible for the difference between the rates. So right now we've experienced a lot of people that would like to stay in their homes for as long as they possibly can, but they're just waiting for these documents to be processed. So they aren't able to access that government subsidy until obviously the documents go through. So there are several people that we have right now that have just been waiting, some for months. And we're just not sure, we don't know what to tell them as far as how long they can expect to wait for this to be processed.
Okay, it's actually a program I'm not familiar with because it's provincial.
Okay.
I'm assuming,
Yeah,
and I'm starting to think I actually should have had Al Najmodi on this call. He could have answered these questions for you, and maybe Derek and Ralph and the other MLAs in the riding. But anyway, you know what? We'll again. We'll work with Al and either his office or our office will get back to you with that information on how that'll work.
Okay. And then my last question, bear with me here. Sorry, I'm taking up a lot of your time here.
That's all right.
So the third one that we're experiencing is we have a lot of employees that are currently cutting their hours because I think you're allowed to make a maximum of $1,000 per 4-week period and still be allowed to access the CERB benefit. So what we have is certain employees that are only working what they can to make that $1,000 and then they're collecting the CERB. But then we're not sure once CERB runs out, because I think you can only collect it 4 times for each 4-week period. So I guess 16 weeks total. What is our obligation to these employees? Because we're having to hire for many of our clients because they're dropping down their hours to get the benefit of both CERB and still work. But then when they come back and their CERB benefits run out and they say, I want my full-time hours back, what is our obligation to those employees?
Well, it all comes down to, you know, what the Manitoba labor laws will dictate, as well as what contractual obligations you may have. I would, suggest you may want to talk to a lawyer on that one. I don't want to give you advice that would, steer you in the wrong direction and get you in a bunch of trouble. This is one of the concerns that we've had with CERB is, as well as the student benefit that we just approved this week, is that it doesn't encourage people to work. It encourages people to, sit at home rather than, or to try to make the most possible benefit from either working or from using the program. And that's not how we're going to get this economy to recover. We need everybody to be engaged and everybody to really be pulling together in the same direction, so that the economy can start to respond. So I can tell you the government of Manitoba has proposed some new provisions to the Employment Standards Codes that allows the employees to be away from work for specific reasons related to COVID. And so they will need to have legitimate reasons why. If they can work part-time, they need to have reasons why they can't work full-time.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just, because in this scenario, how are they going to really track this? Like even when employees go out for work because they're being tested, before they can come back to work and it's safe for them to come back to work, we need to know that they don't have the symptoms, they have in fact tested negative. But in that case, like there's employees that have been out for weeks upon end, and we don't, like, are we able to even, again, this might be something more for the labor laws, but are we even able to ask them for these test results to make sure that they have in fact been tested when they said they've been tested, and they have quarantined for the proper number of days? Are we able to ask for that information from our employees, or is that, I'm not sure if that's a question you can answer, but.
Well, you can't, and they don't need a doctor's note to collect CERB. So they can just say, yeah, I'm testing, I'm not sure. Also, I'll just say is that, and John just held up the PHIA, which all of you guys that are in the medical field, my wife's a nurse, so I know what that means. But it does, and so is my daughter, a nurse, and so protecting the identity of staff and the information of your clients is also something that you have to respect. And also, just so you know, CRA will some point down the road be looking at everybody's taxation as they submit their returns and seeing what they collected from the program and what they actually made during this time. Those that are trying to game the system will get caught eventually. So let's move on. Thank you, Marley. Shauna from Vine Tattoo Shop. Where's Shauna?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Shauna.
Hi, James. I have a very unique situation in that being a sole proprietor and with a tattoo shop, I didn't qualify for the CERB or the CEWA or the wage subsidy. With this rental assist program, I think because it's not mandatory, a lot of people, like landlords, aren't going to apply for it. I guess agreeing to take money out of your pocket is bad for business. So I'm just wondering, like, because are they going to change it and make it a mandatory thing? Because a lot of people aren't getting it.
Yeah, I don't see any program ever becoming mandatory. It's there to help if they want, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why the province has come forward with their GAP program as a way to offset those that are falling through the cracks. So you, as the business owner, can then apply for that rental assistance from the province. Okay.
And is there any timeline on the GAP program? Because they threw us a breadcrumb 2 weeks ago, and there's been nothing in regards to qualifications on it or when it's going to be available. Do you have any idea on that?
We don't know that yet, but as soon as we do, we'll let you know. How's that?
Perfect. I have one more question.
Okay.
And I don't know if you can answer this, but with the phasing in of the businesses, I fall into the to be determined category. So, like, am I looking at July, August, like Do you know on that? For me, it's difficult because my tattoo shop is sterile, and like my room is more sterile than a lot of hospital rooms. I've worked in the medical field, so I can say that firsthand. And I do free paramedical work with cancer patients and burn victims. So like I have a sterile area. Unfortunately, they've put us at the bottom of the pile. So do you have any kind of timeline idea on that?
For reopening, I think you'd fall under phase 2, and phase 2 provincially would be
No.
no, what time?
No, we're to be determined.
Yeah,
Oh,
these
you're
are
to be
for
determined.
future
So
phases. And the province has given no indication at this point. I have been keeping up as best possible with all of theirs, but we don't know if there's going to be another COVID outbreak in Manitoba or in Canada in general. So at this point, it is very unlikely that they're going to announce any future phases past phase 2 until we are like well into phase 2 would be my best guess.
Right.
But I don't want to get into hypotheticals either. So let's just say that, the province will make that determination in due course. We don't have any control of that federally. They have, that is a business and property rights are completely provincial jurisdiction. So they will be the ones that determine when businesses open. I would hope that doesn't go on forever. And I can tell you that, the hairdressing shops that are opening up, the protocols that have been put in place for them just to reopen, including complete sterilization of workspaces between clients, and only people actually have to wait outside rather than being in the waiting room to come into the businesses. That is something that I think will be kind of the new normal going forward as well, until we get a cure or a vaccine or herd immunity or whatever comes with how we deal with COVID going forward. Sorry about that, but we'll
it is what it is.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, we'll try to get you some information on the GAP program.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, thank you. Debbie Nordel. Is Debbie on the line?
I don't see her. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong.
Looking, I don't see her. Okay, so we'll move on. She had more of a, just go back, I'll just read it into, I'll just kind of put the question that she had is, moving forward, what do you think can be done to help small businesses in rural Manitoba to be more successful? Small towns are struggling all across Canada, while cities can't even seem to afford the infrastructure to keep up with the growth. Has there been any conversations to decentralize any federal or provincial services to the rural areas? And I can tell you that on a federal level, there has been decentralization that has occurred, but they tend to go move things out of Ottawa and put them into other cities like Charlottetown, or we had the gun registry. We used to be able to Miramichi until we shut that thing down. But so there is some services that have been relocated, but the Liberals have, for example, there used to be out at in Alberta was the main office for Service Canada, and they shut her down and moved everything into Edmonton. So we'll keep going. We're got about 15 minutes left, 20 minutes. So the last question I believe that we have here is from Colin Bjornson. And Colin and I, we've had an ongoing conversation over the years about this. So Colin, if you want to go, and then I'll tell you what I know.
Yeah, James, the Harbor Authority, along with Council, are wondering if you would continue to work with us as a leader to find out where we have to go and how we go about it, because talking to both governments, they seem to point the finger at the other government, and the only solution I see is to have both governments along with us at the table and try to work out a way of accommodating these things, because you're talking small business, you're looking at the fishing industry. You're also looking at tourism's a big one, and unfortunately, we're not looking at having a whole river dredged. It's the mouth of the river that's causing the problem. And it seems that the governments have swung that over and as the responsibility of the municipalities, and nobody's agreed on it.
Yeah, no, and it's been a problem since the Chrétien government stopped the dredging program in 1999. You know, it's something that I've fought for both for the Red River, the mouth of the Red, do it as a way to do flood mitigation. Of course, you guys on the Icelandic River, it has dramatically impacted the ability for the commercial fishers in Riverton to get out to the lake because of the sandbar that's built up at the mouth of the Icelandic. You know, the one thing that, and every letter that I've sent both to Liberal and Conservative fisheries ministers is that, you know, it's not their jurisdiction anymore. They wipe their hands of it. And you know, it's kind of crazy is that the water in the rivers and in the lakes are joint jurisdiction, federal, provincial. But the shorelines and the lake bottom and the river bed are property of the provinces and are considered crown. And so I think that's where the federal government was able to get out of the business of dredging. And it wasn't just in Manitoba. They got out of dredging right across the country, including in all the major harbors like Vancouver, like Halifax, that those are all done through contracts that the harbor authorities pay for. The only exception to the rule is the St. Lawrence. And that is because it's international waterway. It is dredged to allow the international transit and trade between Canada, the United States, and elsewhere. The interesting thing, though, I've asked my staff to put a question into the Library of Parliament. Colin, the last letter that you guys got out of the Fisheries Minister's office that went to TANUS and it was Jennifer Phillips, who's the policy advisor for DFO in the Minister's office. She actually wrote something here that caught my attention that we're following up on to get some detail. But she says that up until 1999, the Government of Canada undertook dredging operations in Manitoba as part of the federal government's, and this is the key, constitutional mandate for marine transportation and navigable waterways. And I know that it was in 1997 that there was a fisheries committee that made the decision, like the House of Commons Fisheries Committee, used its power to make a recommendation to the government not to dredge anymore. But if there was a constitutional mandate, if there's a federal responsibility that is constitutional, how did they get out from doing it? And this is something that I've never noticed before, and it's actually right here in a correspondence coming back from the minister's office. So we're going to ask the Library of Parliament for more details and a legal analysis of that. And if they are actually shirking their constitutional mandate, then maybe there's a way that we can force them back to the table to start continuing on or bring back dredging, even if it happens on private basis. In that they have, like we have here in Selkirk, of course, the amphibexes, which are jointly owned between the three municipalities, and I think one is owned by the province. Those could be used to dredge on a contract basis with small craft harbors, and of course DFO would reimburse them for that work. And I know that they'd love to get some paying work to offset their expenses. So anyway, Colin, I'm going to look at that as a possibility, and I'll share that information we get back from the Library of Parliament with you.
And I've also sent the information and the depths in that to the group that's in charge of the Apebex, and they are looking at coming up with a price. So the thing I asked from you and on behalf of council is don't let it go. Let's fight it to the end, and I think we'll win.
Well, I've been fighting it for 16 years, and head's getting a little sore, but I'll keep pounding it. Okay, thanks, Colin. We'll carry on. Mark Marowich. How are you doing, Mark?
Good. How are you doing?
Very good.
Thanks. I appreciate, number one, I want to say thanks to everybody in government for doing what you guys are doing, because this is, who knew what to do and all this stuff. And I know every single one of you in federal, provincial, local governments are busting their butt to make it happen. I just want to shout out and appreciate the work that you guys are doing on all fronts. A couple of questions that I have. I've been fortunate. I've been running full out from this whole thing. We're in manufacturing in Riverton. A question I have is the federal hire student program. I like the idea of paying people to work or to get people out to work. What we are finding is it's hard to find people. And we're competing against this CERB program where people would rather take that money versus going to work, which I think is deplorable as Canadian citizens that we would even consider that. But the reality is people are doing that. And for those who are working and need people, it's tough to find people to do that. So I'm looking at, the provincial hire student, which is $5, that covers $7 per hour, just to get students into my factory. What's happening on the federal program with the hire student?
So the federal Canada Summer Jobs Program is already closed off. People are going to be getting contacted here shortly that made applications on whether or not they were successful. I got rather frustrated with the whole program this year. They added more red tape to it. Normally, us as parliamentarians have pretty strong input as to which businesses and organizations will get funding and receive students. I've always fought to make sure that a lot of our, first of all, that we try to get as many students into as many organizations and businesses as possible. Not that I have anything against Walmart, but they used to put 20 students in Walmart. Great job experience for them, but I'd rather see 19 of those students end up in other small businesses and organizations across the riding. So I've always worked at doing that. The federal government has slowly taken away that type of input from local members of parliament as to prioritizing what is the local job market and how we best accommodate that. I always also kept in mind that a lot of our local museums and fairs and festivals, the only government grant that they ever get is for hire a student. And so the Canada Summer Jobs Program is one that I felt was pretty important. But regardless, they have gone ahead with the program with or without me. They have made their determinations which businesses and organizations will be receiving some funding, Mark. The one thing that has brought, we know that there's a lot of students that aren't going to have jobs this summer. So there's a huge market out there. And there is the Canada Emergency Student Benefit Program that we just approved this week. I was happy that we were able to make a number of changes to it. And that includes that every student that wants to collect that benefit has to sign up with the job bank first. And that this is one that doesn't continue on indefinitely, that there is a hard end date to it, and that students are encouraged first and foremost to go get those jobs and to build out, not only collect money to go into their next semester of schooling, but it's also about making sure that they build up their portfolio and their resume as they start to look at entering the workforce. The other option for you, Mark, is the Manitoba Summer Student Program, and I'm unaware of exactly what the end dates are on that for application, but I would suspect that those are coming up pretty fast as well.
And it's not that I'm looking for the money for that. I just need the people. I'm willing to pay them to work, just to work, because I feel that my responsibility for the country is to keep the economy going and flowing. And I'm finding that with some of the policies that have been out there. And as we open up and as we start up too, we're going to, you know, I'm hearing restaurants and other people are finding it hard to bring employees back in. And I think there's a couple things. There's a real fear out there of employees in the workplace catching this thing. And I think the messaging from the government now needs to switch from, hey, let's get back to work, but let's do it right. Let's put in the proper protocols, the proper administrative conditions that we have, the spacing. You know, through this whole thing at our plant, we've distances our group. We have 5 distinct different groups within our manufacturing plant that never meet. We're doing these things because we want to make sure that our employees stay safe. We're fortunate we don't have the general public coming in, but like you said, I'm getting a haircut on Monday, thank God. And I'm going to go to my barber and I'm going to teach.
I wasn't going to say anything, Mark, about last time I saw you to now, but
I'm going to need to teach him about what are the administrative controls, people coming in, you know, like things like taking people's temperatures with the guns that are planted. At first, I thought that was a human rights issue, but really it's not, because, you know, the tattoo person lady there, you were talking about, hey, not opening. I know I have a dentist friend who they have worked really hard to get the administrative control. So we just have to learn to live differently when we open our businesses and going forward. And I think that's the message that the federal government needs to get out there, instead of, hey, stay at home, be scared, all this kind of stuff. Hey, we all now know what this is. Let's do the things that we have to do to open up, but still remain safe. And that messaging, I know, or I'm hoping that you can take that message to the federal government, that we need to change that, because this is not sustainable long term. We are the government, all of us, we fund the government, and the government can only fund us for a certain period of time. So that's, I think when we get to the phase 2 of reopening, just opening up society again, we're going to have a lot of struggles of getting people back to the workforce. Never mind all of us as entrepreneurs who want it to work and understand it. It's just, how do we get people in to get the economy going? And I think that message has to come from our leadership federally.
yeah, no, I appreciate that, Mark, and I'm quite worried about this, where we're going to end up financially as a country. We already have some provinces, and Newfoundland, Labrador is already on the verge of bankruptcy. They weren't in a position to handle this type of crisis at this time. If it wasn't for the so ever since the beginning of April, the provincial debt that they have to sell on a weekly basis, it has been bought up by the Bank of Canada, and not by commercial lenders, not through bonds. Nobody's taking their debt anymore, and that's kind of something that hasn't happened in Canada for quite a long time. Also, just, you know, all the programs that have been announced so far, just to get us through this first quarter of the crisis, are a total of $250 billion. Just to put that in perspective, the provincial budget here is about $13 billion. And so federally, we're going to spend $250 billion just on emergency measures that will last us only 3 months. And the entire federal budget last year was $350 billion on revenues of $330 billion. So we only have $300 billion coming into our coffers. We've got a weaker economy. We're going to have less money coming in, and we're throwing it out the window like we haven't seen before. And 40% of this new debt that we're taking on as a nation is, again, coming through the Bank of Canada. So the Bank of Canada is just printing more money, which will devalue our currency. And I hope we don't end up into an inflationary period like we experienced back in the 70s and 80s. I always say, like, when I took out my first mortgage, when I bought my first piece of farmland, I paid 21% interest. You know, right now, you know, interest rates are low, but if the currency starts devaluating something to the tune of what, you know, some other indebted nations have experienced, and I look at Mexico or Argentina, where they were burning through pesos like it was going out of style. Interest rates start to move up very quickly to try to uphold that fake currency that you've created. So we have this isn't sustainable what we're doing. It's necessary, but we have to find a way to get the economy going again and get people back to work so that the recovery can actually start happening. So thanks a lot, Mark. Great stuff. So King James, you're up next.
Hello, James.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Fantastic.
Sorry, my kids nicknamed me that, so I should have changed it beforehand. Yeah, I mean we're struggling every day in our industry. We're losing money every day. We can't survive on takeout and delivery, and we can't
I
survive on
drove by
takeout.
your shop the other day, and I was thinking about you. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, the community has been so great to me, and our take on delivery business has gone up, but it's not to a point where we're making money. I mean, our rent is $20,000 a month, and our sales are $25,000 a week. So it's not a question of losing money. It's how much money are we going to lose? My biggest question was the rent subsidy, James. The threshold is to be closed or to have a minimum decrease of 70% in sales. And that threshold is way too high. You know, currently I'm at 65.14% decrease in sales over previous year, which is absolutely significant. And you're going to see the landscape of the restaurant industry like you've never seen it before. There's going to be so many closures, and not just mom and pop shops. You're going to see franchises closing as well. But the rent subsidy is a huge problem, and the threshold as well. You know, I've heard Mark's comments. I've tried to hire people back. They either don't answer their phone, they don't answer a text message because they're avoiding you, and they're living off the CERB. And something has to be done to force these people to not be able to collect that money if they are asked to come back to work. And my last point, and then I'll be quiet, is the city of Selkirk has done nothing for businesses to try to help them through this pandemic. I've talked to Mayor Larry with regards to the business tax and freezing the business tax for this year, or at least giving us some kind of relief when it comes to a compensation of business tax. And I've basically been told that's definitely not something that they're going to be looking at. So I appreciate you listening to my concerns, and I welcome your response, James.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, James. And I'll just say this, that you should remind your staff or those that we're working with you that don't want to come back. And this, I guess, goes to all of you, is that out of the $2,000 a month that they're paying, they're going to have to pay income tax on it. So it's not clear money, you know. So it's going, you know, most people will pay around $600. So they're going to have it. So it's in their best interest to have that job security, because this subsidy isn't going to live on forever. The other thing is municipalities, I know, and we got some municipal leaders on the Zoom call, are also struggling. I know that rec facilities are shut down, so they're not making any revenues against halls and arenas and curling rinks and things of that nature, but still have all those costs incurred, and so they're trying to figure out how they maintain it. But you know, keep talking to them, have those conversations about whether or not there can be deferrals as a way to possibly deal with it. But I think that's where your local chamber of commerces are going to come in, Selkirk Biz in particular, and having those conversations directly with municipal leaders. And then you know, what we'll do as well is making sure that all of you on the call here right now get all the information that we have as far as government programs. Megan will follow up with you by email, so that as well as contact information if some the stuff is provincial in nature, that you can actually get those addressed by talking to your MLAs or to the appropriate departments. I'd also encourage you to reach out to your community futures organizations, whether it's Red River North here in Selkirk, Winnipeg River, out at Lac du Bonnie, up at Riverton. Of course, we have East Interlake and West Interlake over in Ashern, and some of them are on our calls. I know Tammy and Lana are on the call with us right now. So they are great resources and help as well navigate through this. And then I guess the then I'm just getting reminded we only got about 10 minutes left, and so we'll take 2 more questions after James. But I hear you on how a lot of people think that the big chain stores and the franchises and the restaurant industry, you guys all got deep pockets. I got a buddy that owns some Tim Hortons, and even though they got drive-through and the drive-through goes pretty good usually at Timmy's, he's saying the volume of sales aren't there. He's in the same boat. He hasn't had a big enough decline to actually get any of the government supports that are out there to help manage through COVID. And if he can't get the supports to help offset his leases as well, how far does he want to go in his own pocket? And at some point in time, you just say enough is enough. And that's the big fear in all this. I see Jim Pelche's got his hand up too. Megan, if you can add him. That he visually put it up instead of using the click on the bottom. But anyway, you know, this is where we have these challenges that on how we get Canada back to work. And the backbone of our economy is actually our small businesses. As much as people think it's the big corporations with the big unionized staff, yeah, they represent a fair amount of corporate revenue back to the government. And that's why I think governments like helping them out as much as they do. But 65% of Canadians work for small business owners, and it is our ma and pa stores up and down our streets in our communities. And it also comes back down to the fact that you know, they represent 92% of businesses. Only 8% of businesses are the big conglomerates, the multinationals. 92% of businesses in this country are self-employed or private corporations, and it is very much a small shareholder group, and they are the ones that are driving our economy. So with that, we'll take 3 more questions. We got the 2 Susans and then Jim. So Susan Braunhuber first, and then we have Susan Prohaska second, and Jim Pelche, you get to bat cleanup. Okay, so Susan.
Hi, James, again. Thanks again for taking my question. The one I have is we have our own business here.
Yep.
And my son did all the water deliveries for us. Now, he had to stop doing that so he could stay at home and look after the children because my daughter-in-law is an essential worker. We had to then increase the staff member that we did have on a probably quarter-time, part-time basis to almost full-time. I see here with the wage subsidy that we have to show a reduction of 15 to 30%. We can't show that, but we had to hire somebody that we normally wouldn't have hired because my son was taking shareholders every so often. We weren't paying anybody out.
Right, everybody was getting dividends.
Right. So now that we have to pay, are we, like I say, we have to show 15 to 30% decrease. And I have to be honest with you, we can't show that because water has been selling like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
For our walk-ins, our major businesses, because of the layoffs that they've had or they've had to close for a short period of time, have decreased a little bit. But is there anything we can do to help pay for this new staff member that we have that we never had before?
So you got increased expenses and lower revenues.
Yes.
That's unfortunate. Yeah, that is something that's pretty unique. You know, and I'd say normally on these types of things, you'd call into Service Canada and try to get an answer and let them walk you through it. Service Canada, of course, has been overflowed, you know, having to deal with 7 million unemployed Canadians. And most of them are also working from home, so they don't have the same type of access to computers and to files and being able to answer the phone and share that information. But we'll take a quick look at this, Susan, and we'll try to get back to you either with somebody you can talk to, or we'll make sure that you know, give you some sort of direction as to what you might want to do. And I guess Ron's saying you can still make use of the 10% wage subsidy. So But
Oh,
these are
okay.
these are new wages. Yeah, this might be a tough one.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, I
That's
see
why
where
I'm
you fit.
questioning.
But we'll explore that, and we'll get back to you, Megan. We'll get back to you. Okay,
Thank you,
so
James.
yeah, you bet, Susan.
Take care.
Susan number 2, Grand Marais Community Center.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. How are you doing?
Wonderful. I'm doing good. Thank you. I had a few questions, but I'm going to just kind of narrow it down to one major one. I'm from the Grand Marais Community Central and RV Park. We offer a variety of services, one being the RV park, another being Travel Manitoba Satellite. We have a gym, a fitness center, a museum. All of those fall in different phases for reopening the economy. But what I couldn't find is anything about farmers markets. Would you be able to touch base on that?
I see Megan scrambling. We did have some information, again, provincial jurisdiction making the decision.
The province announced with the federal government a way to do farmers markets online, but I haven't seen anywhere where they've said anything explicitly about in-person farmers markets. I can definitely check with the province on that and get back to you.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Okay, did you have anything else, Susan?
Well, just FYI, for Grand Marais being the small community, the whole 2 or 3 restaurants have closed, so therefore their washrooms have closed. The gas station has closed his washroom. The provincial park, Grand Beach Provincial Park, has removed all their outhouses. So there's absolutely no public washrooms in this entire community for anyone to use. The locals have actually seen people going into the bush. I don't know if anybody can do anything about that, but there's a lot of people not working and collecting $2,000, and certainly one outhouse could be installed and manned, but
Yeah, good point.
don't visit anytime soon if you've had your morning coffee.
Yeah. I guess, with the opening of the park on Monday, maybe there will be bathroom facilities that will be available. Hopefully they don't keep them shut down. I know that the cleaning and sanitization is a struggle for most private businesses because you pretty much have to sanitize between each use. So you have to have somebody actually manning the toilets. So yeah, that's a challenge. But yeah, if we hear of any way that you could be assisted dealing with this public waste,
Yeah.
we'll definitely let you know. So ladies and gentlemen, we've been on for an hour 15. I really appreciate everyone's input. I hope for the questions I wasn't able to answer, we will get that information back out to you. So with that, please stay safe, please stay healthy, and thank you for being there to support our economy, support our communities, and for your incredible leadership as well. With that, Megan.